Joan.
Congratulations on the documentary.
Thank you, thank you.
Let's start at the beginning. How did the documentary come about?
Well, back in the early 2000s, I was a huge Lost fan, just like many of the people in the documentary. And this was years before I ever thought I would be a filmmaker or do documentaries or anything like that. I just loved the show, and I was swept up in the internet fan culture and trying to solve the mysteries and all these, podcasts and message boards and the fan community and all that. And that really stuck with me. I was in college at the time. I was an impressionable youth, and
Sure.
the first time I got that into a television show, I was a little bit too young to catch the Star Trek wave when that was in the zeitgeist, and because there wasn't an internet culture around that in the 80s, 90s, it just wasn't the same thing. And Lost really, it, it was something I feel like I experienced more than I watched. It's like we all lived through this this journey together back when it was on TV, because it was once a week and you had to wait and you had to, find people to talk to and be like, what do you think is in the hatch? And what do you think is in the hatch? And oh my God, what if it's this? Anyways, flash forward to, 2013, 15, around then when I started doing filmmaking. And I kept saying, it would make a really interesting story is that sort of fan community that came up around this show Lost. But in 2013, 2015, people were still pretty down on Lost. The ending of Lost was the butt of the joke on the late night shows, and in pop culture it was like, boy, that was a great show. Too bad it, ended the way it did. And that was sort of the consensus. And I had loved the ending and didn't understand, but
I
if
same
you
way.
know,
I never understood the backlash against it, but go on.
but you're aware of it, it was a big deal.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
It's like as much as people love that show, and it was a huge global hit, number one show in the world, tens of millions of people watching it every week. Uh, the second it didn't end the way some people wanted it to, everyone turned their backs on it and was like, well, I hated it the whole time. That's a stupid show, things like that. So it felt too soon back then to do a documentary. Like nobody really wanted to talk about Lost in that time. But it was always in the back of my mind as I was making other movies and doing other projects. And then a couple years ago, it occurred to me that we were coming up on the 20th anniversary of Lost, and I sort of, I have this rough sense that nostalgia comes in 20-year waves, and it's okay to talk about Lost now. Also there's all these new people watching it, on Netflix and Hulu for the first time. And from what I gather from speaking with a lot of them, it's like there is no stigma about the ending of Lost or, the whether it's a good show or a bad show or whatever, they just enjoy watching it. And because they can binge it, there isn't that sort of 6 years of your life soaked up into
Right,
this show. So they're not bitter about it when it ends. They're like, oh, that was a good show.
right.
Neat. On to the next. I guess I'll go watch The Leftovers now.
So you have obviously you have a documentary film background. How did the was it easier for you to secure the, because I mean obviously it's about the fan base, but you interviewed quite a bit of the cast. What was that process like getting those initial interviews?
Well, we never thought we were going to. We started out, I know a lot of the fans from the message boards back in the day. Some of my very first Facebook friends were these people, Ralph, who was a
Sure.
producer on it, and Joe from Cancer Gets Lost, who's a producer on it. These folks I've known for almost 20 years on the internet. And so it was a no-brainer of like, well, I can tell that fan story, no problem. And then our producer Ralph is friends and had done a podcast with Jorge Garcia, who played Hurley. So from the beginning, we're like, okay, it'll be about the fans and we'll have Hurley, right? And people will be like, eh. Uh, but of course, I would be a bad documentarian if I didn't at least try to reach out to all there's something like 400 people credited on IMDb as being cast of the show, and we reached out to most of them. But we didn't think people would be in our low budget independent documentary about how much the show meant to the fans. But they started to say yes. A couple people here and there would be like, oh, you know what? That does sound fun. I haven't talked about Lost in years. And what would happen is we would do an interview with somebody and we'd have so much fun for an hour, 2 hours talking about Lost that it would wrap up and they would text somebody else from the cast. Hey, these guys are doing this documentary. Have you heard about this documentary? It's fun. They're nice guys. And it sort of expanded like that, so much so that, we kept going 6 months after we thought we'd be done filming. People kept saying yes. And well, why, yes, I would love to be in your documentary. And it kept going and going and going. And now in hindsight, we did sort of make this definitive 20-year retrospective look at the show. It's still from that fan perspective because that's who
Sure.
we are. But, I if you had asked me when we started who, the top five build people in the cast of our documentary would be, I none of the people who are would have been on my initial list.
Sure.
I would thought. There's no way. There's no way I'm gonna sit across from Terry O'Quinn and talk about, you know, Walkabout, one of the greatest
Right.
television episodes in history. That's never gonna happen. And then it did happen.
You mentioned you had some later additions. I was following the progress of the documentary, and there was some. You were already talking about the premiere, and your last minute. You had some last minute additions. That had been a little stressful.
It was super stressful, and we wouldn't have done it had it not been, Evangeline Lilly was relatively late in the process, and that's just sort of how it works because scheduling with people at that level is a lot harder. She had said yes earlier, but it's
Sure.
whenever we put it on the books, these things are difficult. And J.J. Abrams was the same way. He had responded. We sent out like a sizzle reel as we were going, and by the time we sent it to JJ, everyone else was already in the sizzle. So it's like,
Sure.
look, the whole cast of Lost is in this. Do you want to talk about how you invented it on a napkin one day? That sort of thing. And he was very kind and said yes right away. But it took the better part of a year to get, a half hour on his schedule because he's J.J. Abrams.
Wow.
And and I don't live in LA. So it's like we got to schedule a trip, we got to do all these
Right.
logistics, we have a crew. And so by the time we filmed that interview, we were just over 3 weeks away from having to lock our film for the world premiere because we wanted to premiere it on the actual 20th anniversary.
Right.
That was a goal we had put in place early on. And rather than doing the smart thing and moving that date because we were still filming, in the middle of August and had to premiere in the middle of September, uh, I just didn't sleep for 3 weeks and we got it done. And I put him in the movie and we got all the paperwork signed and everything ready to go. And we put that final render together, the one people watched in that theater. It was like 24 hours before it screened that we had
Wow.
that file working. There was a backup file that was like, oh, we still got to tweak a few things
Right.
that would have worked, but it was a 24-hour scramble.
That's funny. So, I mean, logistically, was it just coincidence then that that 20th anniversary was coming up, and you're like, okay, well, we here's a goal we can meet, or was that something you had from the very beginning that you're like, I want to meet this goal to?
From the very beginning, yeah, Ralph and I were talking about this movie just over 3 years ago in November of 2021. That math works out. Uh, and we started outlining the movie and we started pre-production 3 years ago. And on that very first meeting, we said, "Oh, we got to premiere it on September 22nd, 2024, because the Lost fans will go nuts." And we thought we'd be competing with other fan events and with ABC doing some official thing. And, Michael Giacchino does these great Lost concerts. And we thought, oh, we'll be one of the events on the 20th anniversary. And then nobody else did anything. So we
So
had this
you were
amazing
the
event.
event.
We were the event, and hundreds of people from all over the world came to LA, and there were fan meetups and there were parties. And we had this premiere, and a lot of the cast came, and we had the actual polar bear from the pilot episode on
Wow.
this theater. And it just became this really amazing thing. And it was such a throwback too, because, Lost would be at Comic-Con every year back when
Right.
it was on, and the fans would get together. And then there would be these panels and these fan meetups and all kinds of things during the run of the show, but there hasn't been a Lost event like this in 14 years
Right.
since the finale.
How did you? What was your biggest takeaway from the film? Did it change how you saw your perspective on the series, or are you still in tune with what you originally saw when you watched it?
Both, I think. Like, I still appreciate the show as just a great piece of television, and a formative moment for television history, which is something that I thought was underappreciated, that it was something we really wanted to try to explain to people through documentary, which is like, there was TV before Lost, and that everything you love about TV now, most of those things you can trace back to this one show that broke all
Sure.
the rules, right? And so that is still, when I think about Lost, I think about how important it was in my life and in a lot of people's lives and to television in general. Like, I don't think we get the same level of prestige television as early as we did without a show like Lost, without, JJ and Damon and Carlton breaking the rules and just saying, no, we're gonna pick an end date and we're gonna do that and we're gonna have shorter seasons and we're gonna, know the arc, and it's gonna be so serialized that you can't just tune in and watch one episode.
Right.
So it's still that. I have a little bit of a harder time just sitting down and watching it now. Having met most of the cast, having talked to the creatives behind most of the decisions, I it's it's weird just watching it. It's like, oh, these are all my friends just
Right.
hanging out,
Sure.
So it's lost a tiny bit of the magic,
Sure.
but I still very much appreciate what it is. But I've spent the last 3 years just engrossed in the world of Lost in this
Yeah.
television. So I think I need a little bit of a break
Understandable.
from watching it. I'll watch it again maybe in a couple of years.
My wife and I rewatched it over COVID with our kids who are 20 and 13 now, so they're 4 years
Perfect.
ago, and
Yeah.
they loved it as much as we did. My wife and daughter got matching tattoos, lost tattoos.
Wow.
So it is become generational, which I think is really
Are
interesting.
they in the movie? Did they send them in?
No, unfortunately not. No, maybe I did. Because it was early on that you asked for that, so I may have actually
Yeah.
done that. I may have
We we,
actually done that.
we put a lot. Have you seen the documentary?
I have not. No,
Oh, okay. So you don't know. Maybe
no.
they. Okay. Yeah, we put in a lot of those tattoos. There's a montage, and some of them go by pretty quick. What are they? What are the tattoos?
It's the Oceanic Airline logo with "Live Together, Die Alone" written next to it.
It sounds familiar. They might be in
It's
the
very
movie.
possible. So it's great. I mean, it's interesting that did you find in the fan experience, did you find that there are another generation of people that have really appreciated the series?
Yeah, a lot of people, sort of in our generation, are showing it to their kids, and people who worked on the show are showing it to their
Right.
kids. And a lot of these fans um, are using it as a way to bring family together because that's what the show did 20 years ago.
Sure.
It was one of those shows. Like, I watched it, and my wife and her parents and her younger siblings, and we all, if we could, we'd watch it together. But if not, I knew they were watching it, and then we'd talk about it when we would have
Sure.
dinner the next weekend or something like that. And it was such a thing that brought people together. I think people are trying to recapture that now by saying, let's watch this thing. And there's some great stories like Michael Giacchino, who did the music for Lost and also gave us music for the documentary. That's fantastic. He told a story, it's not in the movie, of showing it to his kids. I think he said when they turn 15 is when he lets them watch it, maybe 14. And what he does is they get out the Blu-rays, but he only lets them watch one episode a week
Oh, that's great.
because that's how you're supposed to experience. And then you
Right.
get to think about it and you get to churn it up. He doesn't make them wait 6 months between seasons like we had to
Fair enough.
wait. That would
Yeah,
be excruciating. But he
that's
said
funny.
that that's what they do, and they all sit together as a family and they watch this thing. What I was more surprised about is that I've met so many people now because we've been premiering it around the world at these theaters, and there's just young people. Their parents aren't showing it to them. They just found it. Somebody said, "What's a good show? I'll watch Lost." That are as obsessed with the show now as we were then,
Interesting.
and that's fascinating. There's people on TikTok breaking down episodes, and there's still this hugely active online community that is fascinating for a show that hasn't been on the air in 15 years.
Right. Your you mentioned it's playing in was it Cineplex theaters across Canada right now?
Yeah,
Um,
that already happened. That's over.
oh, that's over now. Okay, and I know you're doing some you do and you're doing some festivals and stuff. Where else can people see it right now? And what's the game plan for home or video release?
Yeah, so right now we're working on something. We're partnered with Eventive, and they do like sort of live virtual events. So we're doing a live um, virtual premiere, which will be worldwide on December 7th. We don't have the exact time locked in.
Okay.
And the plan is that'll be, if you get the app, you can watch it on your TV with your family and everything. It's uh like any streaming thing, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna show the movie and then there'll be a chat and you can ask questions and we're gonna get some of the cast and some of the people
Oh, great.
live, sort of one of those COVID reunion Zoom things, but it's a Q&A. So if you watch the doc and you have a burning question, we're gonna try to get as many of the cast on there so that you can have this interaction. So it'll be like a live event with a Q&A, which is what we've been doing at theaters, but because it's virtual, we can bring in people from all over the world.
Oh, that's great.
It's really hard to get. I mean, the cast of Lost is so spread out now. Like, good luck getting five of them in a room.
Right.
But in a virtual room, we can pull it off. So
Right.
that's what we're working on next. And then later in December, we don't know the exact dates yet. We're going to have it up on VOD on at least Vimeo, and we're working on Amazon. And then I think Apple and Google will be in January.
Nice.
So it'll be by January, you should be able to, buy or rent the movie anywhere you get movies. In December, it'll be a little bit more difficult because we're putting it out ourselves, and it
Right.
just some places take longer to get up
Sure.
on the platforms than other places. Um, but it will be available worldwide. And right now we're doing things like getting subtitles in different languages so that people can watch it because the show was so big all over the place that we get messages every day on our social media platforms from people all over the world who just love Lost. And part of the fun of this documentary, I think, is that it's just kind of like more Lost. Like you get to go back to the island.
Right.
There's no new story revelation, there's not a continuation or anything like that, but just getting to hear stories from people 20 years later that were there. And I don't know, it feels like a little more Lost, especially in the
Sure.
theater. People getting together and people are dressing up in costumes. It's real fun.
That's exciting. That's fantastic. Congratulations on that. I can't wait to see it. I will say this. I've had the opportunity to interview Michael Giacone and Michael Emerson in the past.
Oh,
Talked to
great.
them about they were promoting other projects, but we I had to talk about Lost with them a little bit.
Got you.
That was the most. I mean, I've interviewed literally hundreds of celebrities. I don't get starstruck very often, but answering my phone and having Michael Emerson on the other line,
Ooh.
having Ben Linus say hello, Jeff, really freaked me out. I'm not gonna.
Oh, he is maybe the sweetest man I have ever met. And I also interview a lot of celebrities,
Yeah.
and he's so humble and so kind and nothing like his character.
No, right.
He was, the least. We interviewed him at his home in New York, and he's like so gracious and moving furniture with us and put out pastries, and he's just like
Oh, nice.
the kindest person. It was unbelievable, but there's still a little bit of that. Oh, he's got Ben Linus staring at me.
No.
It's still creepy.
Sure.
But talk about great actors.
Yeah,
He's
right.
nothing like that character.
Well, thanks again for taking the time to talk to us, and congratulations and good luck.
Oh, thank you so much.
Take care. Bye now.